Agenda 22, Volume 2, Adventures in Anakaland. Copyright 2013 by Octavio Rhodes, Claudio Salazar, Postos Ledesma, Gonzalez Polanco, aka known as Xavier Rhodes. Revised copy 2018 and 19. Chapter 1. The Useless Oracle. When Chili Sue opened her eyes, the sky was a strange, beautiful gold with a swirling haze of clouds surrounding the entire horizon. They seemed to be moving fast. She found herself lying on her back now, on a snow-covered slope on a mountain. She had the strangest sensation that the fluids in her body were gravitating in random directions, as if they wanted to float towards the sky around her. Surreal was the first word that came to her head. She sat there for what must have been 10 minutes. A strange-looking statue sitting cross-legged were resting on many of the small surrounding hills' peaks. Strangely, the snow underneath her did not seem to have sucked the heat out of her body. Lucid dream like I've never had before, she almost whispered to herself. This physically was very relaxing, but as soon as she came to her senses, she let out a loud yelp in complete fright. As far as she could tell, she was alive, and this place was very real. She pinched herself once in the arm, and it actually hurt. Okay. Don't freak out. Deep breath, stay calm, instructed the more rational side of her brain. This is kind of what you always sort of wanted, right? Following her own advice, she took 5 deep breaths and got up. Upon further inspection, above her to the right were particularly thick clouds that blocked the view of the sky there. There were deciduous trees all around the slope. Beautiful. They were of a reddish-brown color, like it was autumn, except that they were unnaturally fluorescent bright. She breathed a sigh of relief. At least she guessed where she was. Maybe. Chili Sue had never personally seen the abandoned ski resort on Mount Muhadeu, north of her hometown. But from what little she knew from outdated travel brochures depicting the fabled place, this landscape looked suspiciously like the slopes of that haunted mountain. Except there are blue Buddha statues on the top of all these surrounding hills, she thought. Or rather, the cross-legged meditative pose that they were sitting in made them resemble Buddha statues. For a moment, Chili stared curiously at the intimidating masks they were wearing. As beautiful as the entire scenery around her was, there was too much to process right now. Which was too bad. She'd always wanted to be in a waking dream. That intellectual mind she'd obtained growing up in that stupid and sophisticated world of hers was working against her once again. She knew it was better to think about survival for the moment. Or should I worry? She asked herself. She'd been through a lot the last couple days. In fact, the whole world had. But her situation had been different. At least not worry right away, she convinced herself. The ground isn't freezing, and I'm not in any danger, I think. This really could just be Mount Muhadeu. And in that case, it could all be far worse. But this is all so weird. It was good that she had once read an article recently that said that people who talked to themselves weren't really crazy and might actually be geniuses. That was comforting because right now she could use the companionship and all the good advice she could get. Still, there was no way for Chili Sue to tell if she really was on that ski mountain, or where she was, for that matter. And how is any of this possible, she thought. What few rules and principles she knew about physics seemed to have gone straight out the window. Chili Sue instinctively reached into her bag for Dixie's book, Esoteric Myths and Esoteric Places, Volume 3, Anakaland. She felt the pages in between her fingers. She restrained herself from ripping it open to seek an immediate explanation. She could not recall anything like this being mentioned in the book. Breathe. Relax, she cried. If she didn't stay calm, she knew her sanity would crumble in an instant. Busting her brains for a scientific explanation, she really did wish she had paid more attention in physics class. Yeah, sure. She could have actually done her homework. But that's like asking most adults to do something responsible with their free time in order to save the world instead of watching TV, she thought unhappily. It wasn't her fault. These portals had screwed up everything. Okay, think, she cried. There's always an explanation. But the only thing she could remember recently about physics was what Dixie once tried to explain to her one time when she'd been cramming for a test. Sure, he had said. It's completely legit and a scientifically proven phenomenon. Einstein's theory of stupidity, she had reamed incredulously. Well, Dixie explained, it had to do with an idea that people are as dumb as they are because of an energy field they create, like a pheromone. It was not as popular as his theory of relativity, and that's why historians try to cover it up, fearing it would ruin his career if people found out about this. I seem to be suffering from irrelevant flashbacks, she grunted as she scratched her scalp. She figured she'd better have a look around. She surveyed the landscape further. The base of this mountain had a few other snowy ski slopes, trailing up to several high platforms by the summit. The slope she was standing on looked ominous in front of her. It, too, seemed to plateau at an upper level located 1,000 meters above the trail like a giant step. Beyond that, it was hard to tell if the ski trail legitimately could be accessed further up, since the rest of the mountain's peak looked too steep to scale. The slope did look quite steep by itself, but not impossible to walk. At least, walk up high enough to reach that peculiar plateau. Aside from the snow beneath her being lukewarm, she found it strange there was even snow because it was so warm out. It was supposed to be spring. Down below, the ski slope progressed about a mile down to an inviting greenway. Peculiar, thought Chili as she stared more carefully at the sky. The hazy horizon in front of her started to clear a bit. From her point of view, it appeared some of the clouds had giant piles of dirt resting on them. There were no signs of anyone on this mountain, or on any ski lodges or anything else. The whole place felt derelict. Okay, I think I know I'm freaking, she said quietly to herself after a moment. Though Chili Sue couldn't sense any immediate danger, she had this uneasy feeling that she should start moving. As she got up and hiked up the slope, she noticed the landscape of trees and hills everywhere radiated an ominous feel of dread that felt like the stuff of nightmares. The air felt thick, like she was indoors. Feels like I'm in a movie set or something, she thought. One of those movies where everything is quiet before something really bad happens. Don't say that. She half imagined a terrifying ghoul suddenly popping out from behind a tree. But in a movie, there would always be some clue as to what to do eventually, she mused. Surprisingly, quite bravely. She looked around and remembered her cell phone. No reception. Great. She walked towards a large rock not far from the edge of the ski trail. Luckily, the snow there was compact and she didn't sink in it, although the bottom of her sneakers were now actually getting cold. When she reached the rock, Chili Sue finally relented and fumbled for esoteric myths. For 30 minutes, she sat on the rock and thumbed through the book, looking for an explanation to any of this. Was this Anakaland? I don't get any of this, she sputtered. There's nothing in here about this place. No stories about Buddha statues or skies that change color. Chili looked around uneasily. Her thin sweater and sweater vest were keeping her warm, but she knew something needed to be done. The sky was now a yellow-green. She threw the book at a tree in disgust, but immediately ran to retrieve it, like a bad parent that had accidentally shoved her kid to the ground. Gently, she tucked it into her bag and apologized to it. It brought her solace. Chili explored the forest on either side of the ski slope for an hour, trying to see if she could make out the trees a little bit better, or the shapes of any buildings or houses hiding behind any of the trees. But her search was fruitless. There seemed to be nothing but woods as far as she could tell. So it only made sense to continue walking up the slope for a better view of the landscape around her. As Chili continued her ascent, her mind started to play tricks on her again. If this really was Mount Muhadeo in the district of Ziana north of the Boring Realms, then maybe she might be able to see the strange, sinister landscapes that made up the fabled speed traps of Peepity's Nice specifically to her right, if the clouds finally cleared. But that would also mean she was in trouble. There was a whole nest of bogeyman stories she kept hearing about growing up, specifically about these border realms of Anakaland. They were subjects that had filled the entire district of Torturia with dread. Were these portals teleporters? If this was Mount Muhadeo, she had never heard of giant blue statues perched all over the hilltops on these strange wascapes. It was starting to get dark out, wherever this place was. Chili Sue looked at the slope again and groaned in despair. It was going to take her another hour just to reach that plateau. But from up there, she might know the direction to get back home. I wish Dixie had left a clue or something, she lamented miserably. Are you here or not? She remained resolute to reach the plateau.